Running a sub 3 hour 30-minute marathon is no easy task. It's the fastest time required to qualify for the Boston Marathon as a female runner, so you know it's not something you can achieve without hard work and dedicated training. In this video, we will discuss a case study from an athlete we're coaching at Optimal Performance Coaching and how they achieved a marathon time of 3 hours and 27 minutes with 22 weeks of training. We'll go through a detailed breakdown of their training plan leading up to the marathon and how they were able to reach this milestone mostly running 4 times a week. Before we go through the training, let's break down the 3 hour 30 marathon and what's required to run this time. It requires us to average 4:56 per kilometre or 7:57 per mile for the duration of the marathon. For the calculations, we have assumed that the marathon is 42.5 kilometres or 26.4 miles, as we normally run a few hundred metres more than the marathon distance during the race. Now that we have gone through the requirements, let me introduce you to our athlete, Tom. Tom is 29 years old and works full time. Tom worked the 9 to 5 job for 14 weeks of the training and then started working a regular shift work as a nurse for the last 7 weeks of training. Tom also had a few small trips planned during the year, which meant his training had to be modified in those weeks. Tom also had a baby on the way during his training, with the baby being born only 2 weeks before the marathon, so Tom really had a lot going on during his training. Let's take a look at Tom's running history. Tom always enjoyed running but never properly trained for a running event before. He would rock up to races and just run. Tom averaged approximately 1 to 2 runs per week before starting his training and could run 12 to 15 kilometers. Tom's best time for a half marathon was 1 hour and 55 minutes 2 years ago. Now that we know a little bit more about Tom, let's have a look at his training. When looking back at his training, Tom had 4 specific phases of his training: base building, speed and strength development, race specific training, and the taper. And now, within these phases, let's see how many weeks we spent in each phase. Remember that every athlete will be slightly different, but this is how we decided to break down Tom's training. We spent 4 weeks in the base building phase, 11 weeks in the speed and strength development phase, 5 weeks in race specific phase, and 2 weeks of tapering. If we break this down even further, we can have a look at the number of runs Tom completed each week during these specific phases. In the base building, Tom ran 3 times per week, 4 runs in phase 2, 5 runs in phase 3, and 4 to 5 runs during the taper, which much less volume. We won't go through in significant detail what each phase is and what it involves, but if you would like me to go into depth, please give this video a like and leave a comment if you would like a detailed discussion on each phase of the marathon training. Now let's talk about the type of sessions that Tom completed during his training. Regardless of what phase of training he was in, he completed 3 key sessions: easy runs, the harder and faster sessions, and the long run. Of course, as the training progressed, the duration and the frequency of these runs varied. Let's now talk about how these specific sessions fit into the different phases of training. We'll focus on the hard sessions and the long runs for this section. During the base building phase, sessions that were focused on were low intensity. An example of a harder session during the base phase is easy hill repeats. These sessions are a great way of building strength in the legs without going too hard on the intensity. The long runs in these weeks were at a low intensity where the focus was building aerobic fitness and getting our body used to running for a longer time. If we look at the speed and strength building phase, an example of a harder session can be sessions like a fartlek session or 1 kilometer repeats. These sessions are higher in intensity and working on getting you faster and stronger. The long runs during this phase are now getting longer too, with short bursts of marathon efforts included in this phase. An example is a 20 kilometer long run with 5Ks of efforts at marathon pace. Next, if we look at the race specific training, the hard sessions here become longer and more specific. An example session could be 3 by 10 minutes at half marathon pace or 2 by 5Ks at between half marathon and marathon pace. These sessions aren't for the faint-hearted, they are very difficult. The long runs again become longer with more time spent at marathon pace. An example of this could be a 32k run with a 25k of this at marathon efforts. And lastly, during the taper phase, the hard sessions are shorter in duration, but we like to keep some intensity. An example session could be some 800 meter repeats or shorter fartlek sessions. Your long runs will also become shorter in length. And now let's take a look at Tom's mileage over the 22 weeks. If we look at the graph of Tom's training, you'll see that there are lots of ups and downs in the training. And there are a few things that explain this. During a long training plan like this one that spans over 5 months, it's really important to have weeks where you reduce your running volume to allow your body to rest and absorb the training. And depending on the athlete, you would typically want to do it after 2 or 3 weeks of training. You may also remember at the start of the video when we talked about Tom that he had a few trips planned during his training. We really tried our best to plan these recovery weeks during weeks where he was going to go on these trips so he could recover and enjoy his trip whilst ensuring he's maintaining his training. And as much as we wanted to keep a constant schedule, the fact that Tom was working as a nurse doing shift work meant that our training plan required high levels of flexibility. In summary, for Tom, a relatively inexperienced runner, this is what we learned and how you can use the learnings from Tom's training to make sure you achieve your running goals. 1. Keep things nice and simple. Your running program should be based around those 3 key sessions: your easy runs, hard runs, and long runs. 2. Be consistent. Consistency is one of the most important things to achieve your running goals. By consistently building your pace, strength, and endurance, you'll get fitter whilst lowering your risk of getting injured. 3. You also need to be flexible in your training. Whilst we want to run a PB, we need to also make sure we are living our lives. Your life shouldn't revolve around running, and you need to find consistency in running whilst enjoying your life. Sometimes having a coach can help you be more flexible with your training without feeling the guilt if you miss a session. And lastly, ensure your training is specific. Tom made sure all his training was very specific to the goal he was trying to achieve. And if you can focus your training around those 4 principles, you're most of the way there. And of course, there is a lot more to meeting your goal time than just doing your training. There are other factors like nutrition and race day execution that also makes a big difference. But if you're able to follow the principles discussed in this video, you're well and truly on your way to your new PB. I hope this video has helped you towards your marathon goals. If you'd like to hear more case studies like this and want me to go into more detail on some of the things discussed in this video, please subscribe, like, and comment on the topics you'd like me to discuss next. And as always, if you're serious about crushing your running goals and want to discuss one-on-one coaching, feel free to send me a quick email in the description box down below. And as always, be active, be optimal. Until next time.